Hello and welcome to the Chop Shop. My name is Dion Tucker, and I want to thank you for tuning into this episode of the Black Trombone Chronicles. This is our first true COVID edition where I have one of my heroes with me, the great Vincent Gardner. That really is Vincent under that mask there. For those of you that don't know Vince, he's the lead trombonist in the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. He's an amazing educator and just an all-around awesome person. Vince, how you doing today, bro?
Man, I am good, and thank you so much for having me. It's good to sit here and chop it up with you, man, even virtually. You know, it's been a long time since we've seen each other.
It has been. It has been. This has been a really interesting year, but, some things have grown of it, one of them being this series. So I'm really happy that you're able to take your time and sit down and rap with us, man. Thank you so much for doing that.
Man, it's my pleasure. It's such a beautiful series, man. I've enjoyed every one of them.
No, thanks. Thanks, man. Thanks so much. I love it because people get an opportunity to hear it straight from the person's mouth as how all of this happened. You are literally the reason why I became a jazz trombone player. I'm going to get into that a little bit later, but it's your fault while we're here. But if we could start a little bit, could you tell us where you grew up and how did you get into playing the trombone?
Well, I was born in Chicago. But I grew up in Hampton, Virginia. We left Chicago when I was 4 years old. So I grew up in Hampton, Virginia, and Virginia Beach, Virginia for a time. And so I was always in band. Both of my parents are musicians. They're both music educators. My mother was the chair of the music department at Hampton University, and my father taught at Norfolk State University for a time. So I was always growing up in the HBCU college environment. And I spent more time on the campuses of HBCUs than at my home. When I was little. And so I was always around kind of the collegiate music environment, marching bands, choral concerts, orchestra concerts, whatever they were involved in, I was always there. And so I was always in the band, but I didn't really take it seriously. But I was in it, but I guess had some kind of musical talent that would allow me to kind of do okay on solo and ensemble festival in the 8th, 9th, 10th grade without practicing that much. And so I kind of just, I played sports, I was like, the girls are over there by the football team, so I'm gonna play football. so that's where I went, and I did that. I did that up until like 11th grade. I stopped. I played football in 10th grade, and then I wasn't playing. Like I was on the bench. I wasn't really playing, but I made the team.
Yeah.
And so, man, I realized that wasn't going to be my path, and then I really started to get serious about playing the trombone like around 11th grade. I got into the Hampton All City Jazz Band. And there was a great trombone player named Al Morris who was the director, and he hit me to my first J.J. Johnson record. And man, when I heard Turnpike, and that just completely it blew my mind. Like I couldn't believe that I was playing the same thing that this cat was holding on this record cover, because what I did sounded nowhere in the realm of that.
Yeah,
so that's what really started it for me. That record. And that moment started it for me. And then I just got more into it. And of course, my dad is a jazz musician. And but he wasn't living with us at the time. So he didn't have much direct influence on me getting into jazz before the 11th grade. Wow. But then once I got into it, I started connecting with him more, and he started just hipping me to all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And turning me on to play people and records, and he had all the vinyl anyway. So whenever I go visit him, man, he just tipped me to all kinds of stuff, So So I started 11th grade on is when I really got the bug, and I started on this path. I feel like I'm still on the same path from when I was 17.
Yeah. Wow, that's funny. I mean, usually I wouldn't jump in, but I have to just like throw in my thing because our stories are so similar in a weird kind of way. My father grew up in Hampton, Virginia, too. He still lives there. I think not too far from where your parents were.
No, not too far.
Many years later. And around the same, I think I was 15 years old when I first met you. You were at University of North Florida, and you did a clinic, a trombone for this IJE, I think was part of the thing. You did a trombone masterclass, and you played J.J. Johnson's solo on Mysterioso. And that was it. I had the same exact feeling that you had. It's like, there's no way that this person is doing right in front of me with the same thing, but I was seeing it. And I was like, man, okay, this is what I want to do. At that moment, right then and there, it was like, this is what I want to do. So such a similar or parallel there. As you started to go into higher education, did you wind up going to HSBCU?
I did. Well, I went to Florida A&M University. I think when I met you, I might have still been at FAMU at Florida A&M.
Okay.
And I may have just been switching. I transferred and finished at the University of North Florida. So
Okay.
I think I was somewhere in that gray area where I was about to go to UNF and
Okay.
finish up over there. But I started out at Florida A&M University, and I was there for 4 years. And then I went to UNF and I finished up there.
Yeah. Yeah. How did you find those, especially going in between the two campuses? Like, what were some of the other than the obvious, but what were some of the differences that you saw between the culture of the two campuses?
Well, I mean, of course, one is focused on Black culture and focused on preparing young African Americans for whatever the world may throw at them, and they kind of have that goal permeating through how every facet of it, how you deal with going to meet with your teachers, how you deal with administrative processes, how you deal with all these things. It makes you very aware that there are double standards and that there are ways that you're probably going to be approached or handled that are differently from other environments or environments that are without prejudice or any types of those feelings that may keep African Americans from obtaining anything. Yeah. So that's always very present at a HBCU.
Yeah.
And that you know it. Not that it's permeated, not that everybody's militant like this all the time.
Right.
It permeates everything that's done, that you have to be aware of them. So it doesn't surprise you when you get out in the real world and it does happen. At least you know that it was going to happen. Yeah. So that's the one thing about it. As far as the music, you know, it's really, this is one of the things that is to me one of the biggest travesties of HBCU culture as far as the music goes, is that HBCUs don't generally embrace jazz music. And we're, of course, you know, African Americans are the creators of the music, and our educational institutions that we have perpetuated for all this time don't embrace it. They're really only at HBCUs maybe 2 or 3 jazz studies programs out of the 50 or 60 HBCUs in the country.
Wow,
you know,
that's deep.
And you know, so it's just really, really a travesty. And that was the same thing that happened at Florida A&M. The program was not very dedicated towards propelling people that were interested in jazz music and playing jazz music. Mm-hmm. It didn't see it as a viable career option. It didn't see it as something that was necessarily worth its attention in developing a curriculum, putting faculty behind it, you know, full-time faculty behind it to teach those. It just didn't do it consistently. It attempted a couple of times. They attempted. You know, Victor Goose taught at FAMU while I was there.
Okay.
For 1 year. We had a guy named Marty Robinson that was a great trumpet player. We had Mike Teitelbaum, who was a great saxophonist who teaches at Ithaca College now in New York. I mean, so we had a few that came in and out, but nobody was just there constantly to develop it. And so you know, unlike, you know, a Berkeley or somewhere else where, you know, dedicated faculty for jazz music that's there to develop it. So, you know, so it was like that. So when I finally got to the point, I was in the marching band at FAMU, of course. You know, the Marching 100 is like still the greatest marching band that has ever existed. Yeah. And I was in it for 3 years. So I was having a good time. I was having fun. Yeah. But, you know, having got the jazz bug before I went to FAM, and then wanting to develop it and realizing that after, you know, 5 hours of practice at 3:35 in the Florida sun, you don't have any chops to practice a J.J. Johnson solo after that. Plus the classwork that you have to do. I said, I had to make a decision. If I'm going to learn how to play jazz music, I need to go be somewhere where the curriculum supports me learning to play jazz music, and I can't do that at FAMU.
Yeah.
And that's why I ended up going to North Florida.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, speaking of work ethic, you know, one of the things, and I always talk about how important it is for people to see what it is that they want to do, see somebody doing it. And you were that person for me. So at this same clinic, right, you taught the clinic that day, then you drove somewhere like a couple hours and you played a gig there, and then you came back and then you played the concert that night with the faculty band.
That's right. That's right.
And I remember that. And I was just like, man, not only do you have to play like this, but you have to hustle. Like, you know, I couldn't even fathom doing 3 gigs in one day, but I was like, this cat taught, then he went and played, and then he can't. okay, this is how you do it. So I've always had that hustle ingrained in me. I mean, to the point my wife tells me now, like, you don't have to do everything, but I'm just used to doing everything. I learned that from seeing you do that. So it just ingrained in me right away. Hey, this is what you're supposed to do. Now, fast forward to when I moved to New York. Shortly before I moved to New York, I'm going to remind you of some stories here. I was right before I came to college. I came to New York for about 2 weeks, and I basically just hung out with you for like 2 weeks. We were playing at spots like St. Nick's Pub. You were playing like all over the place. And one day you said, come by your crib, practice before your gig. And we sat down and we played rhythm changes through all the keys. And okay. I have a tape of this somewhere.
Hey, okay.
This tape exists. It's buried deep because hearing myself play rhythm changes in D at 17.
Look, I don't think I want to hear me either.
Trust me, you were good. You were good. But you kind of took me under your wing, like immediately. And you just always looked out for me from jump. My first gig in New York was because of you with this cat named Gilbert, this reggae band. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
the cat
I remember
that used
Gilbert,
to fold
man.
up the, yeah. So,
that's right.
He fold up
in the palm like that.
Yeah, right? Yeah. He fold up the $50. You wouldn't know what it was, but he'd give you a little something and just walk away. I was like, right. All right. But that was my first gigs, man. And that was all influenced by you. As an educator and as somebody, is that something that you consciously think of, like, hey, let me look out for this cat? Or does it just permeates from you and people want to be like you because they see what you're doing? But as you're older now, is that something that you're a little bit more conscious of passing on to your students?
Well, I'm aware of it because, and I kind of realize it now. It's a product of my own environment, and it's a product of the people who invested in me. Is that everybody's not serious.
Yeah.
Only certain people are serious, and all through the history of music and the history of jazz, there's always been people that bullshit.
Yeah.
So with that, and you hear stories of them. Bird tells stories of people that cat they used to call the demon that would come up at Minton's and just go all over the place. And so there's always been people that wanted to be around the music, but not serious about actually trying to learn how to play it. Mm. But when I see people that are serious and they've invested in themselves, and then I see them looking to me as if I have some information that might help them out, I'm more than willing to give it to them. I want to help them out, but only because I see that investment that they've made. Like, I don't really have much time for people that are not serious. Yeah. But I don't put that same investment. I'm not going to convince you either that you need to be serious about it. But if you are, and I can see that, and you come to me, then let's get to it.
Yeah.
Play rhythm changes all day.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I am. And I realized that everybody was like that with me. Like, when I wasn't serious about it, I wasn't necessarily trying to come around the music. But when I did get serious about it, I was fortunate to meet Frank Foster, man, when I was in high school. When I was, because my brother, Derek, my brother played in the Count Basie Orchestra under Frank Foster. When I was in 10th grade and 11th grade, right at the time I was stopping playing football and getting into jazz. Okay. Derek had just joined the Count Basie Orchestra. So I was able to meet Frank Foster a number of times, hear the band, hear what a jazz band is supposed to sound like, and the greatest one at the time. I mean, Count Basie Orchestra was just killing. So man, when Foster and my dad knew each other, because my dad played in the Count Basie Orchestra in the 60s with him a couple of times. And so they all knew each other, and they saw I was starting to get into it, that Foster invested in me and really gave me a lot of encouragement and a lot of really hard criticism too. And I was just messing up, butchering all kind of changes. He would always tell me straight up. He was like, "Man, no, why did you do that? Why did you play that?" And then I would try to be that 17-year-old, act like I don't know what he's talking about. He said, "No, you take his horn out and play what I played wrong." And say, "Why did you play this over that change? You could have done this." And then he correct my idea and say, "This is what you should have done. Now, if you learn how to do this, you're going to be all right."
Wow.
And he would do stuff like that to me. And then other people that I met would do stuff like that. They'd be real hard on me, but they'd always give me the solution. And so, man, for me, that was just like the way I approached it all. And my dad was like that too. When the times that I did have it, man, he would take. I remember I was working on the Chopin, the Prelude by Chopin. It's just it's a piece that on piano that doesn't, it's not, you don't have to have a whole lot of chops to play it. You know, it's one of the things I could actually play by Chopin.
Right.
And man, he took the thing, and this is right when I was getting into analyzing chords. And my dad took it. I found this piece of paper a while ago. He took it and marked up all the chords on each chord for me.
Wow.
So I could see how the progression went. But when I didn't understand what progressions were. And now I look back at it, I'm like, hey, he mapped out this entire thing. Like, there's just been people that just invested like that in me when they saw I was serious.
Yeah.
And so that's how I am now. When I see people that are serious, man, I try to give whatever I can, because that's how people were with me.
Yeah. You definitely did that with me. I mean, Frank Foster, this connection is direct to me, because once again, there was a rehearsal at New Jersey Performing Arts Center. This is back when I was in college. And I think once again, you were hustling. You had another gig that was conflicting with the Frank Foster rehearsal. So you said, man, come to NJPAC and just come check out this rehearsal. You said, I got to leave early, so maybe, since you're there, you can jump in and play. And I was like, all right. So I sat there through that whole rehearsal, and then it was time for you to go. And you were like, hey, Foss, this cat's here, let him sit. And I did. And that was my first time playing with Frank Foster's band. And the same thing happened. It was the beginning of, first time, it was the first Black big band I had ever played in, that everybody was all Black. And for people that don't know, Frank Foster and the Loud Minority, his band was an all Black band, unapologetically so.
Right,
and it was just an amazing lineage and a great way to learn. But exactly what you said is exactly how it was passed on to me. So just hearing it firsthand and hearing how you received it and how you passed it on, it just makes so much sense.
Well, man, I feel that same way, even much more now as I get older, that I got to be even more directed, especially in the way you've seen the scene change just like I have. You've seen like the attitudes of people that are 17 playing jazz music change, like from when you were 17.
Yeah.
So, so even you have to be even more focused and more direct with them to let them know this is what, if you want to learn how to play, this is what you have to do.
Yeah.
And there's not really much gray area. Now you can of course do this and something else, but you got to do this if you're going to learn how to actually play jazz music.
Yeah. One of the organization you work with, the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, run by Wynton Marsalis. I know many people have seen that group perform, but education is a big part of what you do there. And education is something that you do extremely well. I remember you telling me early in my career, hey man, just figure out what you want to do and develop it. It's like, that's it. You don't need a dissertation for, it's like, hey, figure out what you want to do and develop it. That lesson is still there. It still has never left. So how do you see as an African-American instructor, a lot of the times the keys to, the kingdom goes through usually white men. So usually not until a white male is standing there are things validated a lot of times. Now that you're in this scene where somebody like Wynton is the perfect African-American person to validate, not only because of his knowledge and his playing, but the way that he conveys the message as an educator, how do you feel how do you feel your role as an educator is passing on this information to the next generation?
Well, I think it's extremely important that I do so. That I've been given things, and I'm still developing it in myself too. But I've been given things that it's my responsibility to give it to somebody else. And so and it's great. And again, it's great that Wynton Marsalis exists in that position that you're talking about, because he is so thorough in every aspect of who he is. Playing, teaching, writing, whatever you want to call it. He's completely thorough in everything he does. So it's great that he exists and that it allows people to see what he's doing, and that there are others that are also teaching and playing and doing things, that give us an audience to allow us to pass these things on. So it's extremely important that we do it. And, you know, I mean, I've learned so much from him also, just being around him and hearing him play fourth trumpet in my ear for the last 20 years. It's just, that's an education. So, you know, so man, it's just, but even in that, like, man, even in that, to be honest, like I have an understanding of how the fourth trumpet should approach their parts in a jazz orchestral setting that I don't know that anybody else has. Except for people that are sat in my chair or next to me, because of the way that his musicality, how he approaches blending with the lead. You know, him and Ryan Kaiser, he's always trying to play under Ryan like the best that he can. Like it's just one of those things. Like, you know, if just putting music in front of people in 4 parts and say play it, and not providing any kind of context to how you should deal with this part, is nothing like the way I've heard this man try to play fourth trumpet for the last 20 years. You know, so it's just, there's so many just nuances and details in it that I think I've just learned so much from him, man. And and so it gives me like it gives me a lot of energy to pass on what I've learned from him and from Frank Foster and everybody else that's invested in me. I mean, a lot of people that we won't know, big names smaller names. I say it's not smaller, unrecognizable names, I should say. People that you might not know, that people like Eddie Locke and Benny Waters and Jane Jarvis, and people that taught me things, you know, that I played with, you know, that just in passing, they weren't even trying to give me a lesson, but they gave me a lesson. Just from Al Gray, you know, just from hanging around them. And so, man, I have to pass that kind of stuff on. And I believe that I've learned the format in order to do it. And I can still pass it on, even from an African-American perspective. Because, you know, African-Americans, we teach differently. Because we were taught differently. You know, we were taught, we teach from a very cultural perspective, and we should. You know, just in a Black household, there's a way that parents talk to their kids, even respectfully, that's different than how anybody else talks to their kids when they teach them something. In a Black college, there's a way that instructors talk to their students that's different from any other institution. And so it's a very cultural thing. And I teach from that perspective, even if I'm not teaching Black people. I teach from that perspective because I believe it's a very straightforward and effective way to teach.
Yeah, man, that's hitting it on the head right there. You know, I can't remember what book it was that I read it in that says, you know, a lot of time in these education settings, because they weren't designed for Black people, we're just kind of there observing how other people should learn. But now that we have people like yourself, you know, that it's a direct way of how we should learn that everybody gets to benefit from. Not just African Americans. So that's like unbelievably important. And that's something that I see with the organization down in Houston that you're the artistic director of. I think I look at that band as a direct reflection of the area that it's in, which is something that might not be the case if there's not somebody of color at the front of it. You know, I see the diversity in the band, and everybody in there can play, and it's such a great representation of that area. Could you talk a little bit about that program and how you've been nurturing that with all the experience that you've taken from everything else that you've done?
Sure. Well, thank you, man. I agree. I wanted to create, when I created the Jazz Houston Orchestra, I wanted it to be representative of how unique Houston, Texas is in its geography and all the influences that are around it that have contributed to what make it very special. You know, we only went an hour and a half from the Louisiana border, you know, a 5-hour drive from New Orleans. So there are a lot of people from Louisiana in Texas, but it's still in the West. It's still Texas. Southwest, so it mixes with Hispanic culture, mixes with Louisiana culture. You know, we eat boudin, but we got the best tamales you're gonna ever find in the world. Like it's just a mix there that's very unique. And so for me, man, I had to, and I've learned just through being in New York all these years that, and then more, I learned about jazz history and about the origins of the music, that we all have to come together in order to play. You know, it's got to be like, not that we did not absolutely need an orchestra like the Loud Minority, an all Black orchestra. We needed that. But we also need orchestras where everybody's represented. And I'd be just as proud to play in a Loud Minority right now as I would to be playing an all white band or a band that's mixed or anything else. Not to diminish the Loud Minority ever. But I felt the need to create a band that was made up of great, diverse musicians.
Yeah.
And there was so many cats from Houston that really can play.
Yeah.
Man, it just surprised me. Cats I didn't even know about. Of course, I knew about Andre Hayward, my man.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Shelly Carroll,
Yeah.
being down there, and a few others. And there's a great trumpet player named Dennis Dotson, who
Okay.
man, this cat is such a fluid. He's about in his 60s now. He's an older cat.
Okay.
Man, he's so fluid and melodic when he plays, man. I mean, it's amazing. Wow. And I didn't know about him, and I should have known about him. I think he played with Woody Herman back in the day,
Okay.
But man, I didn't know anything about him. But like, when I talk to Joe Lovano and people, they know him. And so Dennis is down there. He plays with you, that kind of thing. He makes their eyebrows go like that. But he's that kind of. So man, like just when I saw the diversity that was there and the opportunity to put together a band that had all of these bad cats, it just came together that way. And I was lucky to be able to get them, and they wanted to play in the band. So I was lucky to be able to do that. And we've done a lot of diverse music, and everybody's embraced it wholly. And when we had the opportunity to play, so I'm looking forward to getting back to them.
Yeah, for sure. How now in the summer of 2020, I mean, 2020 was a year that most of us want to forget. There was a lot of crazy stuff. There was some good things, but there was a lot of craziness. Right. By having a group like that, did you use that platform to kind of display diversity and display, like, as an example, hey, this is how things should be? Because, we saw a lot as Black people with the George Floyd murder, with the Breonna Taylor. We just saw a lot, and it was heavy on, I know it was heavy on me. And I was looking for outlets, different ways that I could help get some of this burden off. This series wound up becoming one of them. But did you do anything with the Jazz Houston or with your own personal projects to kind of express how you were feeling throughout those difficult times?
Well, we of course we couldn't perform, of course, during the pandemic. But what we did do is do a lot of online education, and I made sure to have. And again, we're in the South, so you're from the South. You understand how things tend to play out. There tend to not be a lot of diversity when programs are done in the South. So I made it a point, just like with the band. I made it a point that we were able to garner a very diverse student group that tuned into our education series that we started in April of last year. And but I made sure to have a lot of different instructors from a lot of different backgrounds that were teaching them. So, that kind of thing, it seemed to me at the time, and I believe this is true, that having that happen, as their parents are walking by in the background, they see this Hispanic cat teaching the trumpet lesson, or they see a Black guy teaching the lesson on transcribing, or they see a white guy teaching this. Just as it happens week to week, over and over and over, and having that attached to jazz education, it starts to just get in the back of their minds the understanding that that the music is made up and contributed to by all people and should be.
Yeah.
And that it needs to be. Like, if you remember how the look of the old, and I'm not to down old IAJE, but you remember how old IAJE used to look, man. It was very much all white.
Oh yeah.
I mean, all the positions of prominence were almost all white. We had every once in a while a Black president that would come by. Bunky Green was president for a while, but aside from him, it was like all. And so, and when you started to see the people that would perform at the old IHJE festivals, and just people you would see, it just was not as diverse as it should have been. Yeah. And so for me, man, I'm going to make sure that everything that I do has diversity, because they're bad cats that can play all over the place.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was one of the things I wanted to make sure that the look of that program was as diverse as my outlook is on jazz music. Like, I think that we have to make sure that everyone's included. It doesn't have to be biased towards anyone. Just like if you can play, you can play. If you can play and teach, then you should play and teach.
Yeah.
Whoever you are.
Yeah. And that's so true. And I think an important thing for people to take away is that it takes a conscious effort for things like this to happen. It's not just going to magically happen and then all of a sudden everything, you have to put the effort into it. And a lot of times I think the same effort that was put in to keep Black people out of things is the same amount of effort that needs to be put in to have us included in things. You know,
Right.
it's so important, and it's going to take everybody. Like, we can't do it by ourselves. It's going to take everybody. So I'm really glad that you said that.
That's a beautiful statement that you made. I mean, just imagine, just think about, man, historically, all that wasted energy towards trying to keep Black people down.
Yeah.
It's all of that energy. I mean, energy, legal energy, Congress, like just think of, slavery, Congress, like all kind of local laws, segregationist laws, all that kind of stuff, just all through the history, all of that energy.
Yeah.
Think about, man, how much, sharecropping, all of the other stuff, man. Think about how much energy was put into keeping all of those systems in place, that if all of that energy had just been put towards making this a better society, where we'd be right now in 2021.
Yeah.
Like, it's just amazing when you think about the energy that people took. I mean,
it really is. It really is. And Vince, before I let you go, because I know I got you in a hotel lobby, I'm not going to keep you down there too long.
It's good to talk to you. I'm good.
Yeah. Let me ask you one more thing, though, on that energy tip. Yeah. You're somebody that's traveled the world. You've probably seen just about every corner of this world as much as anybody else. How do you, from all of these experiences, and you're still the person that I met when I was 15 years old, you've kept yourself incredibly grounded. What advice could you give to people out there, whether it be younger musicians, whether it be older musicians, or just people in general, and how to keep themselves grounded and keep that positive energy and that everything that you emit that is you? What advice do you have for them to help them guide them in that direction?
Well, I can just say that if you're trying to be a musician, and this can really go for any genre, whatever you're playing, but we're talking about jazz music, and it really permeates jazz music, that there are standards to playing the music. There are people that we universally recognize as masters: John Coltrane, Louis Armstrong, whomever you might, Wynton Marsalis, whoever you might want to talk about. There are things that they did. There's dedication and practice that they put into that made them who they were and made them sound how they did. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that there's been one figure, and this can go with any discipline, one figure that didn't put in the work that came out with a great result. Mm-hmm. So the work that you put in and your knowledge of it should humble you or give you energy. So if you know, you have to be completely honest with yourself. If you haven't done the work and prepared yourself, you don't have any reason to have any kind of arrogance towards anything, or you don't have any reason to feel any type of way that you are above doing the work and above the discipline of the scholarship that it takes in order to be great at whatever you want to do. So you should be really honest with yourself about how much work have I put into this thing that I want to do. And that, to me, keeps me very, very grounded, because no matter how much I practice right now, I still don't sound the way I want to sound. You got to have a goal. You got to have a goal towards what you want to sound like. And that goal to me was formed with J.J. Johnson and listening to Curtis and Slide Hampton and Bill Harris and all those great musicians that we all know. But man, to me, I don't sound anywhere near as good as any of them cats. So for me, I got work to do. And that means and that's what keeps me grounded, is that the work is there and the proof is in the sound. Yeah. So if you're a musician, the sound that you make should help to keep you on the path that you are. It's really nothing but the sound. It has nothing to do with social media, and it has nothing to do with any other outside influences. You and your instrument, you and your craft are the most important thing. Do the work to get the sound that you want on that. And when you achieve that sound and you actually feel that you are, then make that the floor again and achieve a better sound than that.
Yeah.
And I promise you, no matter what you think, you can find a recording or a young cat or somebody else that you don't know about that has something that you probably should aspire towards. And you thinking that you've achieved something, then you hear one thing, you're like, oh my God, where did this come from?
Yeah.
So man, all of that's what keeps me kind of grounded. And it's a positive thing to have a path or something to go towards, a goal. Yeah. So be very goal oriented and keep on the path to it, just unrelentingly, just go towards it all the time.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, spitting knowledge. So this is my lesson for however long we haven't seen each other, but
Too long, man.
That is just spot on. And I think like you said, once you hit what you think is your ceiling, make your ceiling the floor.
The floor,
and
right.
keep on building. That's such a great way of looking at it. And understand that your voice and your development as a musician has a lot to do with your development as a person. We are just vessels. When we play music, whatever is going on is going to come out in our music.
Right.
So
That's right.
embrace it, good or bad. Embrace it all, because that's really going to add to your voice. And that's definitely something I've learned from you, Vince. Like, I'm so thankful that you instilled that in me at a early age of me playing the trombone. Like, it's something that I carry with me. So thank you so much for that lesson. And thank you for, man, sitting down and taking your time, going to the lot, man. I really appreciate you doing that.
Man, it's my pleasure, man. You're such a bad cat. I'm just happy to talk to you on any level, with our horns or without.
Hey, man.
You doing this, because you've also always been positive and driven and hustled, ever since so I love that. And so, man, just continue that, and we got to get on the bandstand together soon.
Absolutely, man. I cannot wait till that happens. I really can't wait till that happens. Vince, thank you so much for your time. And I want to thank everybody for tuning into this episode of the Black Trombone Chronicles. If you want to learn more about Vince, I'll leave some links in the description below. And if you haven't done so, make sure you subscribe to this YouTube channel, The Chop Shop. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time at The Chop Shop. Peace.